All right. So, hello everyone. My name is Elizabeth Angerman. I am the specialist in the Office of International Affairs that works most closely with our programming in Japan, although there are a couple of offerings in Japan outside of the Department of East Asian Languages and Literature. So, as we go along, if you find that the language requirements for the exchange programs and for the Kobe program are higher than what you expected, just rest assured that there are a couple of options, at least in more normal times, that travel to Japan as well. So just to give you an idea of, well, let's see if I have any idea of what's going on here. Can we change? There we are. What we're going to talk about today, I at least just want to acknowledge the fact that we are in the middle of a global pandemic, and that in fact this does impact our ability to administer programming, and then from there to go into an overview of the programs that are currently offered out of the Department of East Asian Languages and Literatures, and are thus managed by Ohio State University. I also wanted to throw out a couple of programs that are not managed by Ohio State, that are in fact independent, but that may be attractive to you and that you may want to put in the back of your mind as alternative options. And then of course, there is the opportunity to ask questions. So I'm not particularly able to see the Q&A or the chat while I am sharing my screen. So I will stop periodically to see if we have questions, but throughout you should feel, hello, Dr. Quinn, how are you today? He is joining us here too. And while we let him log in, I also just wanted to say that I will continue to look for questions. And so you should feel encouraged to type them into the chat or into the Q&A as we go. So Professor Quinn, did you want to say anything before we got started, or are you good? I was just introducing myself and the agenda, but if you'd like to say something too. Not to put you on the spot. No. All right. Well, I can keep going. But of course, Professor Quinn, as you have questions, please, or comments, please do jump in. So one of the things that I did want to talk about is, of course, trying to navigate international travel during this pandemic is really tricky. And, oh, right on. Hang on one second, everyone. Turn off my camera for 1 second while I go looking around for something. Give me 1 second, everyone. Sorry, everybody, there it is. Okay, sorry. I think we are in business now. All right. So it takes a village. How long have we all been using Zoom? And it takes me forever to figure out how to do stuff. Okay. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Here we are. Okay. So there is a closed captioning for anyone who would like to use it. In the meantime, I am going to go back to the current trends here in international travel, which is really just a way of reminding you that we are in the middle of a pandemic and that conditions do continue to be very fluid. So as you've seen, just over the last several months, even here in the United States, what we may have projected for international travel back in May and early June then became a very different forecast as we got further into the summer and into the autumn. And so I think we should be very flexible and very tolerant of ambiguity as we move forward, particularly since, prospective travelers, prospective applicants for these programs are really going to be obliged to deal with a lot of different entities here beyond Ohio State. So whether that's, say, the Japanese government, the consulate in Detroit, airlines that you might try to book through, our various host institutions, all of these entities are making different policies, guidelines that we all have to abide by that sometimes do not play nicely together. And these are all outside of our control too. So, as we move forward with our thinking about and our planning for international travel and for education abroad programming, I think that the first thing that we want to acknowledge is that education abroad right now does not look the way it did when, say, our older siblings did it, when, our older friends did it, our friends from other universities who are older may have done it. Education abroad right now is strange, right? Currently, Japan is not allowing foreigners to enter. It is very difficult to get visas. We are hopeful, obviously, that will change in the near future. There are places that we are working on with other students on other programs where, there are caps on the number of people that can be in one space, or mask requirements, both indoors and outdoors. There's a lot of different things in terms of how different countries are responding to the pandemic. And really, I think continued flexibility and your continued willingness to understand the pandemic both as a public health issue, but as a cultural issue, because different countries and I think different cultural attitudes are really responding to the pandemic very differently, and just being aware of that, I think, is helpful. So just kind of keep all of those things in mind, and just also be advised that things change frequently and without warning. So having said all that, much of this presentation is the way it would have existed in the before times. So we are going to talk about the international exchange programs that Ohio State offers. These are the ones that are currently available to you to apply for. If you have been poking around on our website in the last week or two and trying to find those applications, probably you were frustrated. We were delaying opening the next year applications until pretty recently. So I think I opened those yesterday morning. So if you've looked since then, you may have seen that they are accepting applications now. But if you looked earlier than that and didn't see it, that's why. So now this is something that is available for you to look at. These are the programs that we will discuss. And again, as always, continue to put questions in the Q&A in the chat as we go forward. So just taking them alphabetically here, starting from the north and working our way down, we can talk about Hokkaido University, which is in Sapporo. Way to the north there. Sapporo is, of course, famous for its I think it's Ice Festival, it's Winter Festival. It was the site of a Winter Olympics years and years ago. So, what all of this is getting at is that it can get pretty chilly in the winter. So if you are interested in, I think, a colder climate, this is a good one for you. The other thing that's nice about the Hokkaido exchange program is that it is the one that we reserve for students with only 1 year of Japanese completed at the time of application. And that's not to say that Hokkaido University can't offer higher levels of Japanese. In fact, they can. But because it is one of the more group-oriented exchange programs, and certainly one of the more supported exchange programs, because of those factors, we at least allow for students with a little bit less Japanese language proficiency to apply for this one. One of the other things that students have found very attractive about the Hokkaido exchange program is those students who are keen to do research and who are ready to speak at length about the research they intend to do in an application, because Hokkaido takes that very seriously. And has worked in the past very hard to link our students with appropriate faculty mentors there at Hokkaido. So we've had a number of students in the past who have already kind of had a clear idea of research that they wanted to do, and were able to articulate that in a study plan. So there is actually a whole section of the partner application, the Hokkaido application, that allows you to talk about what it is you hope to accomplish research-wise on this exchange program. So these are very good reasons, I think, or one of the things that makes Hokkaido unique relative to the other programs. Otherwise, I can add that this is the HUSTEP program, or the Hokkaido University Short-Term Exchange Program. That is the program track that we apply to. As its name suggests, of course, it is very much intended for you, the short-term, non-degree seeking, non-native speaker of Japanese student. So as a result, you will get language instruction, but then also a number of content courses. I will mention here as well that Professor Quinn is the one who currently does the credit evaluations for these exchange programs. So when you have specific questions about the nature of the credits students have brought back, he's frequently going to be a better person to ask than I, although he can also tell you that we haven't brought back as many students recently, just simply because we haven't had anyone traveling in a while. So Dr. Tommy Weil is another person that you can potentially speak to for kind of that longer institutional memory about what students have brought back. But very broadly speaking, anybody who's hoping to take care of credits towards a Japanese major or minor, or the East Asian Studies minor, usually is going to be pretty well taken care of by any of these exchange programs. We have now moved all the way south to Tokyo here, to International Christian University. As part of its name suggests, it is a very cosmopolitan institution with a lot of international students at it, and a lot of very international focus to its course content. The second part of its name, the Christian part of it, does signify, right, there has been a religious affiliation to the institution, but by no means do you need to identify yourself as Christian or in order to go there or to feel comfortable there. I would actually turn your attention more to the international piece, that it does really, I think, try very hard to be very cosmopolitan in that respect. So, anybody who identifies otherwise should still feel very welcome. And I think that this is potentially a good match, but it does have that religious affiliation, so just be advised that that does exist. We are now moving into institutions that have a longer or a more substantive language requirement. So here, we're going to start talking about programs where you need to have had 2 years of college level Japanese completed at Ohio State at the time of application. The one exception to this is if you are currently in that second, third year intensive program. So right now you would be in, I think, the second year reading and writing, speaking and listening, and then spring semester you would be doing that second part where it would be effectively the third year. As long as you are in that intensive track and set to complete it through the full academic year, then you are still eligible for these exchange programs. But otherwise, we need to have 2 years of college level Japanese completed at the time of application, not prior to departure. And the reason for this, for any of our programs moving forward here, is that it is the general philosophy of the department that you have a more substantial foundation upon which to build your language abilities, but then also we are moving into programs that are a little bit less mediated, a little less structured, and as such are going to require a certain level of comfort on your part just to manage in Japan and in this case, Tokyo, working with that host institution and having more language to fall back upon. ICU in particular can do the whole range of language ability, but what we have found over the years is that for native speakers of Japanese or heritage speakers of Japanese, this has been a particularly good fit. So what I mean by heritage speakers are those students who may have one or both parents are speakers of Japanese and have spoken to them. And you may grow up with a really proficient speaking and listening, but maybe you cannot read or write. It's a very different set of skills that you have when you were a heritage speaker, as opposed to someone who has learned it as a second language. And then, of course, there are the unique needs of native speakers. So any of these three categories, so you, the learner as a second language, heritage speakers, or native speakers, all three types can do very well at ICU, but this has, I think, a uniquely helpful curriculum for those latter two categories of heritage and native speakers. For those of you who have a sufficiently high level of Japanese language proficiency, you do have access to the Icu Course Catalog, which is to say you could take courses in Japanese if you have enough Japanese language to be able to do it. If you don't, if you are kind of at that intermediate level, that's also fine. Their exchange office is going to set up a curriculum with you in mind so that you can take coursework, Japanese language stuff, content courses taught in English. There is that opportunity there too. The other thing I will say about International Christian University ICU is that historically our students have been able to get into the housing there in Tokyo as long as they are very observant of the housing deadlines. You miss that deadline though, and there is no housing to speak of, because being in an urban environment, it goes pretty quickly, and exchange students are often the last ones in line, as they would be here at OSU. So I think as long as we are very observant of those deadlines, our students have done very well getting into that housing. Otherwise, we're looking at private arrangements where you independently work with either lessors or apartment complexes, whichever, that will rent to you. And ICU has been helpful in the past, helping students to find that independent housing. But this is again why we like to see students with more Japanese rather than less, because that's an additional responsibility that you take on potentially. Okay, Nanzan University is our other institution with a religious affiliation. This particular institution was founded by Jesuits And again, it's another institution where it has that affiliation, but by all means, you should not feel in any way pressured to identify that way. They welcome students from all over, of course. This is another institution where they are going to want to see at least, or we at least are going to want to see the 2 years of Japanese at the time of application. And Nanzan's focus is a little bit different from what you were perhaps accustomed to here at Ohio State. And what that means is their focus is either more or perhaps equally upon reading and writing. And for students that have been through the curriculum here, where the initial emphasis is on speaking and listening, what has happened in the past is that our students test very high with the speaking and listening, but they test higher than what their reading and writing can support. So what we recommend typically is that the students that apply for Nanzan be the kind of students that either are already pretty comfortable with kanji, with the reading and writing piece, or who are very open to the challenge, because it has been communicated to us as being a challenge. So just be advised that reading and writing piece has been hard for students in the past, because their speaking and listening is so high, at least proficiency wise. So just to be aware that is an additional ask on this program. The other thing that's unique and interesting about the Nanzan exchange program is that homestays are possible. You can also elect to stay in the dorms. And frankly, I don't know how COVID has impacted the use of homestays. That, I think, is a question that we would ask if you are interested in pursuing it. I have yet to work with a student take advantage of the homestay option, which is a bit of a shame. I mean, I understand that this is one of the things that students are frequently really anxious or nervous about. But at least on other programs that I work with, the homestay option is also the part that students are frequently the gladdest about having done, upon their return, because it is a very unique way to have that window both on the culture, but then also as the language as it is spoken in the home. So those are, I think, the unique aspects of the Nanzan program. Otherwise, the curriculum is going to be one kind of like what I was describing before for you, the non-degree seeking short-term non-native speaker of Japanese. So they have a lot of coursework that I think slots very nicely into a cultural studies major or minor. So again, if you are looking to earn credits towards a particular degree, this program will help you. Riccio University, we're back to Tokyo here. Nanzan was in Nagoya. We're back to Tokyo here with Riccio University. One of the things that's unique about Riccio is that all of the other programs are for the full academic year. Riccio currently is our one opportunity for you to go for one semester. So at this point, you would be thinking ahead to spring 23, because the deadline for 22 has passed, but at this point, you are still situated to apply for the full academic year if that's what you would like to do. But just tuck that away in the back of your mind that Riccio also is available for spring semester only if you're unable to go for the full academic year. Again, it's another 2 years of Japanese at the time of application. So again, we'd like to see more. They are, I think, better about guaranteeing housing. So that's what that little note here about dormitory is concerned. Obviously language and content courses, but this is with their, it's like the Center for International Culture, some CIC, something like this. And I bring this up because I think one of their real claims to fame is coursework that helps with translation or to a lesser extent interpretation. So if you are very keen to learn more about those skill sets, if that is a skill set that you are already really interested in pursuing, Riccio is a good option for the folks looking to do translation. Okay. Tenri University, I'll be very honest with you, we haven't sent anyone to Tenri in a while, just simply because it has been a while since they've sent students to us. So the thing about exchanges is that we do have to match those balances and to keep things pretty even in terms of the students that come in and the students that go out. So I believe this is back on the table again for this year. And one of the things that students have really pointed to, the past participants that have traveled on this program, is that it's pretty much all language all the time. There are some content courses that are available, but not nearly to the extent as they are at the other institutions. These are primarily language courses that you would be taking at Tenri. So this is very different, I think, from some of the other programs in that respect. I think it has provided very good language training, but to be honest with you, I think they have all provided very good language training. It's just that that's what Tenri does pretty much exclusively. They too will guarantee housing. The University of Tsukuba is outside of Tokyo. It's close, but not technically in Tokyo. It is a science and technology school. Tsukuba City is sort of a Silicon Valley corollary, or it is comparable to that. And then this is another institution where if you have very high levels of Japanese, you are able to access the full course catalog. So we have had students in the past who had really high levels of Japanese that really wanted to have some of that science, the STEM exposure there at Tsukuba, and we're able to do so. And this is another institution where the housing is guaranteed, so you would be able to access that. It is, I think students have really enjoyed that particular institution, particularly because of its proximity to Tokyo, but without necessarily having the same cost of living as Tokyo. And lastly, Waseda University is, Waseda is certainly one that students come to already knowing about because it does have the high reputation. I will, however, say that we partner specifically with their School for International Liberal Sub-Studies, the SILS program, which is one that skews very social sciences. So we have had students in the past hoping to go there just to do Japanese language, and were disappointed because they got Japanese language, but they did not have the full exposure to Japanese that they were hoping for, right? They were hoping that those content courses were in Japanese. They were hoping that more was in Japanese than what actually was the case. Because a lot of those content courses, the networking, the diplomacy, international relations, there's even some business aspects to it. I think one past participant did company visits and that sort of thing, but all of that was in English. So, the students that were particularly keen to really develop rigorous language proficiency, I think were a little disappointed by what they got at Waseda, just based on the program that we partner with. I think for students that are looking to have that more social science exposure, you can't beat the networking that would be available to you at Waseda. So as long as we understand what each of these institutions offer and manage our expectations accordingly, I think we're still in good shape. So having said that, I see that I have 2 questions in the Q&A, so let me look. So how would being in the 3rd year Japanese course here at OSU, but being a transfer student this year, affect my application? So we work with students that have transferred here pretty regularly. In fact, a number of students in the past have transferred to OSU specifically for the Japanese language program here, and or specifically for the study abroad options for Japanese language students. I would encourage you to speak specifically with Dr. Bile, the academic advisor for students majoring or minoring in Japanese, because where transfer students run into trouble is with the so-called residency requirement, where there is that certain percentage of courses that you need to complete at Ohio State in order to be considered, a degree seeking student here, or to have earned a degree here, I think more accurately. The credits that you would earn on any of the exchange programs that I've mentioned so far will count as graded Ohio State credit. But how that actually works in terms of keeping you on schedule is getting into information that I don't really know about. So, on the one hand, we work with transfer students all the time. On the other hand, I would want you to really get the details ironed out with your academic advisor, just to make sure that spending a year overseas, and always make sure when you speak to your academic advisor that he or she knows that you are earning graded Ohio State credit and not transfer credit, because that will be a really important distinction to make when you explain to him or her about what your plans are. So again, you have transfer credits that you brought in. What you would earn on these programs would be graded Ohio State credit, but how does that work to keep you on schedule? So those are the sorts of questions that you're going to want to ask when you meet with an academic advisor. Okay, so we answered that one. Good. What is the deadline for 2023 applications? So I'm assuming we either mean spring of 23 for Riccio, and that would be an October 1st deadline, or we mean the academic year 23-24, which is so far in the future, is kind of blowing my mind. But for academic year 23-24, that would be an application deadline of November 1st of 22. So mark that in your calendars if you are planning ahead. Okay, now my computer is not working. Okay, well, we'll just know that I answered that question. Would Waseda be a good school for an international studies, East Asian studies major? Of course, but then any of the ones that we've mentioned here would be. I would ask as a follow-up question what your area of specialization is in international studies, because I think that there are some specializations that might be better served at other institutions, whereas some would be really well accomplished there at Waseda. It kind of depends. But the short answer here is that any of these programs would be good for international studies plus East Asian studies minor. I think you're going to be well served by any of them. So let's see if I can close these out. My computer right now is not letting me do it. Oh, that did terrible things. Okay, I'm just going to hide those then. Move on. But again, feel welcome to toss more questions in the chat or the Q&A. Okay, so as far as our timeline is concerned, and I'm going to move my face up here so that I can see this a little bit better. Be advised, and we talked a little bit about this already here, the applications for the next academic year for academic year 22-23 are already open as of yesterday morning. If you do not find that to be the case, or if you have trouble with it, let me know, and I'll go in and fix it, although I did spot check them, so they should be okay. But we have until November 1st to complete those applications. The OIA application right now is a handful of kind of short answer questions. So, why did you pick this particular program? How would you, how are you a good candidate for it? How would you represent Ohio State? These sorts of things. What do you hope to accomplish on it? You are going to upload a copy of your advising report. There are 2 letters of recommendation that you need to supply, preferably from a recent instructor of Japanese. So, there's a finite number of faculty in East Asian, so make sure you're giving them plenty of time, not only to work on yours, but inevitably to work on everyone else's. So do make sure that you are contacting them sooner rather than later to request those references. After the deadline has passed, we usually have given students a supplemental application, which is just asking a few more questions beyond what we request in the straightforward OIA application. And then Professor Quinn and I usually do interviews in the first week or so of December. We try to send you off into winter break knowing if you've been nominated and where we've nominated you. So that's more or less how that timeline goes. We will then make those formal nominations going into winter break, and then in early January, I have historically met with the nominated students to go over the host institution applications, because some of those will come due real quick in spring semester. And then we're going to hang out and wait for a really long time, because a lot of times these partners don't get back to us with acceptance decisions until the summer. It's very likely that my office would make a program viability decision about whether or not we can send people to Japan before some of our host institutions even get back to us about, whether or not you've been admitted. Generally speaking, I can say that our eligible students are admitted by the host institution. Generally speaking, it's really bad form for partners not to admit eligible students. But I have seen our students denied by partner institutions. So one of the things I tell students in the nomination letters, and again in that January meeting, is no buying airfare, no booking housing or anything like this until you've gotten those letters of acceptance from the partner. But that's the general process and timeline. I'm going to go back because if it'll let me. Yes, I wanted to talk a little bit about the costs, just to make sure that this is super clear. The thing about exchange programs is that there's no program fee, which doesn't mean that there aren't costs associated with the program. It just means that they are paid out of pocket and usually over the course of your program. So you are going to go ahead and continue paying your regular Ohio State tuition, just like you normally do. You're going to pay for international airfare to get yourself there. You're going to put a roof over your head and feed yourself while you're there. One bullet point that is not on here, but that could very well be incurred as a result of the pandemic, is quarantine housing. We're seeing that a lot with my exchange programs in Korea. Similarly, if you need to be tested either before you leave to go overseas or upon arrival, or both. That has been the case with a number of my programs that have traveled. So these are additional costs that I might factor into. Everyone is required to maintain their primary insurance. We enroll you in a supplemental insurance, and then some of our partners even require you to do the national insurance. And then there are other squirrely things like, in-country transportation fees. We estimate that all together, tuition, airfare, housing, all the things I've just described, all of it together is about $35,000 for the full academic year. And before we all have a collective freak out, just think about what it costs you to be at Ohio State for a full year, for your tuition and your meal plan and the dorm, or your rent, or your parking pass, or the various expenses that you incur here, and make that the comparison between the price tag that I'm suggesting and what it costs you to go to OSU. Because in many cases, I think what you'll find is that studying abroad is a little bit more expensive, but it's not as much more expensive as you might be thinking. Because I think that 35,000 out of context very rightly gives us all pause, but put in the larger context of what it costs just to exist at Ohio State over the course of a full academic year, it might not be that far off base. So just to put a fine point on the expenses here, you're going to pay your tuition and the supplemental insurance. And those are about the only two things that you're going to pay on your statement of account. Everything else associated with your program would be paid out of pocket. So it's while you're there in country, you're paying your rent, or paying to the housing office and buying groceries or buying textbooks or that sort of thing. So there's very little that OSU bills you for. At the same time, though, any financial aid that you currently receive will continue to apply to your account just like it normally does. So that will help, hopefully, with the costs of the program. Similarly, there are a number of scholarships that are available to you. This is usually something that Professor Quinn and I talk to students about during the interview. But you can also get a jump on those too by looking at the OIA website. We list the grants and scholarships there. Okay. All right. So one more study abroad program administered by Department of East Asian that I'm just going to tuck away in the back of your mind as an option. It is not currently traveling or scheduled to travel this upcoming May, but does typically travel in May, and that is the Japanese Language and Culture program in Kobe. Typically, it is Terada Sensei who leads this particular program. So if you've had her in class, you can ask her more about it. Nakayama Sensei has also led the program a number of times, so he is another good one that you can speak to about this. But it's just during May, so it's about a 3-week program there in Kobe. You can think of it as being a continuation of Japanese 2231, which is that culture course, because what you are working on as part of this program is essentially a research project. It is building onto topics of interest to you from 2231. So there is, or at least in the before times, there was kind of a long weekend homestay option that you do, a number of local field trips. There is some service learning and that research that I mentioned. It is 3 credits of EALL 5797, which is applicable to the major. So that can help kind of keep you on schedule too. But it's probably going to travel May 2023 at this point. The program fee has usually been pretty low. It doesn't include big ticket items like airfare and meals. Those are typically things that you would still need to take care of. But it does include those in-country excursions and the accommodations. So it is pretty good. Professor Quinn, I just want to ask, my closed captioning has stopped working. Is it still working for you? Okay, good. I just wanted to check to make sure. The deadline for the Kobe program typically falls around the same time as the exchange program, so November 1st deadline. So if it travels in May 2023, expect there to be an application deadline of November 1st of 2022. And I'm sorry, Professor Quinn, did you want to jump in here? Okay. You took yourself off mute, so I didn't want to continue on without you if you wanted to say something.
Yeah, didn't want anybody to hear me drinking my beer.
The other thing I'll say about the Kobe program is that we have started to see a number of students who go on the Kobe program in May and then come home and then go on their exchange program in, a couple months later in the fall. Not everyone can do that either because of finances or work or academic schedules, but that is an increasing thing. So if you have the will and the ability and you would like to do 2 programs in Japan, I've heard some students describe it as kind of testing it, when they can go with faculty and with other OSU students before going on an exchange program, which is a much more independent and much more hands-off experience. So for some students, it was really a confidence building exercise to go in the May and then go later on the exchange program. So that is an option that you can explore too.
That's a really good point.
Section headers in here, but now we are moving into the programs that are independent of OSU that I did at least want to tease out here because you should apply for them if you're eligible. The Critical Language Scholarship is an 8-week intensive program. Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to look up where it was going to be located this upcoming year. And in the past, it has been in Okayama, but I don't know if that will be the same location upcoming year, but you can easily look on the Critical Language Scholarship website. If you just Google Critical Language Scholarship, it comes right up. So it is a very rigorous immersion program for 8 weeks in the summer. This is a State Department scholarship. The United States State Department has designated, I think it's around 15 languages as being critical. And kind of the mission of this scholarship is to educate kind of broad swaths of the population in these critical languages and critical cultures. So even if you are not a language major, and perhaps especially if you're not a language major, this is potentially a very appealing option for you. They are looking for, say, business majors and engineers and social workers and nursing students and all of the above, right? So do consider this. It seems to me that Japanese does have a prerequisite language requirement, which is to say, I think they want to see like a year or 2 of Japanese in order to be eligible. But if you're already on the CLS website, take a good look, because there's, as I said, 15 languages or so. So I know I've worked with Japanese majors in the past who wanted to get, dip their toe in with Korean or Indonesian or Chinese, right? Those are also critical languages, and students applied for a different language for over the summer and then went on the Japanese exchange too. So you can do Japanese, but you could also do other things too. That deadline, I looked earlier this afternoon, and the Critical Language Scholarship application is now open. It is an online application, which if you are at all interested, I strongly recommend you log in and look at it sooner rather than later. It is not an application that comes together overnight. It is one that you need to spend some time with. It is one that will also require letters of recommendation. So again, be thinking about who you're going to ask, and ask strategically. My experience with the Critical Language Scholarship, I usually read every year for the Russian language track. And it seems to me that they are looking for a couple things. So if you are hoping to pull together a competitive scholarship application, one thing that you're going to want to talk about at length is your commitment to language learning. They're trying to work out how committed you are to learning this language, to becoming proficient in it, right? Because you're going to have to take this, pinky swear here that you're going to speak only Japanese on the program. So they're looking for someone who either understands what an immersion program looks like, and or someone with a demonstrable willingness to undertake that sort of a pinky swear, right? So if you are doing is it Oshabarakai? Did I say that wrong? Did I completely butcher that? All right, when you were done snickering at my terrible Japanese pronunciation, is it?
It works fine.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Okay.
But that's the sort of thing that if you are doing it, make sure you talk about it in your personal statements. And if you're not already doing it, you get in there quick so that you can say without lying that you do these things, right? So whether you're in the Japanese student organization or you're going to the conversation partners, like those are the ways that you are leveraging your access to language learning. The other thing that they really look for in these applications is what you bring to the cohort, and of course, what you want to take from the cohort. So to take the last one first, so can you connect participation on the Critical Language Scholarship to concrete professional, academic, personal goals? And you have to be very specific. You have to be as concrete as possible. I think it's a little bit unfair of an ask, because I don't think it's fair to ask 20 and 22-year-olds what their future is going to entail, because with any luck at all, there will be a lot of opportunities and different things that will lead you in different directions. So it's a little unfair. At the same time, though, they just want to make sure that you are purposeful, you are deliberate, that you have goals, that you are, working logically towards an end destination here, either academically or professionally. And they want to know how this program is going to help get you there. So that's what you're going to take out of the program. They also really want to know what you're going to put into the program. They are very keen on creating diverse cohorts for this program. Right out of the gates, you are at a gigantic public institution in the Midwest, which already makes you appealing because, I think a lot of the applicants for these sorts of programs are at snooty schools on the coast. So you're already in a step in the right direction here. They are also looking for students who would otherwise be underrepresented or underserved in education abroad programs. And when we talk about underrepresented students in an education abroad context, we are typically talking about men, students with high financial need, first generation college students, non-traditional students, STEM students, students of color, GLBTQ, veterans, potentially even athletes. Like, these are the students that we don't see as much in study abroad programs. So if you are able to casually mention the ways that you tick any of those boxes, do it in those personal statements. Because I know from my training as a reader for this scholarship, I'm not allowed to guess or assume about applicants. So if you are going to tick those boxes, you need to tell me, the reader, how you do that, because I can't guess or assume or backfill information. And since that is one of the primary missions of this scholarship, to, cultivate diverse perspectives in those cohorts, make sure you're mentioning it. Okay, I know less about the JET program, but Professor Yuasa suggested adding it in, and I think that it's a wise thing to bring up at this point, because for some of you, you are in your third year and your fourth year. Studying abroad is tenuous right now, and you may just want to go ahead and graduate and find other ways of getting to Japan. Let me back up and say that the Critical Language Scholarship, you can apply for. You should do it often, right? Even if you are a first semester freshman right now, you should start applying, just simply to get a feel for how that application goes. But where I'm also going with this is that it seems to me that you can still apply and then graduate and go that summer after you graduate, right? So even if you change your mind and decide to go ahead and graduate this upcoming spring, you could still be eligible for CLS. And of course, the only way that you're eligible for the JET program is if you have that bachelor's degree in hand by June 24th of next year, right? So this is, I'm really only speaking to the folks that are considering, are weighing their options between applying for one of these exchange programs and just graduating. So if you are one of those students that might just graduate, but still want to go to Japan, then you will want to apply for the JET program, or at least get your name in the hat. That application deadline, like CLS, is coming up in November. And they are doing, the Detroit consulate is doing a virtual information session coming up at the end of October, which if you're looking to do a competitive application, I strongly recommend that you do any of those information sessions, just to make sure that you are getting all of the information that you can about, how best to make your application competitive. The JET program will want you to be a US citizen by that November deadline. CLS, I don't think you have to be a US citizen. I think it is open to DACA students as well as green card holders, but check that eligibility. I think if you are an F or a J international student, neither of these is going to be a good fit. But if you are an F or a J student, you are still eligible for the exchange programs as long as you're a degree seeking Ohio State student. The JET program is a good option for teaching English. And it seems to me that it's pre-K all the way through high school. So you have to have a demonstrated interest in working with that age group. I know that that's part of a competitive application. But otherwise, I would encourage you to check this one out and to see if any of your professors can give you feedback that they've received from other participants. And with that, I am pretty much at the end of my formal presentation here. And I'm going to give you just a second to jot down my contact information if you would like to be in touch. I am Angerman.6. So please do follow up if you have more questions. And with that, I will also stop sharing, which totally made my computer unhappy. So I hope you can still see something because I sure can't. Yeah, not really sure what just happened there. But if you are still there, I'm going to see where I can find in the question and answer, which is also not cooperating right now. And technology is not my friend today. Let's see if I move this around. Okay. Let's see what happens if I click on this. Nothing. All right. Well, let's see about logging us all back in and seeing if that helps. Well, I am very sorry. I don't know what just happened here. I am going to go ahead and shut this down since it does seem to be having a massive freak out. Do please email me if you have any questions, and I will take any questions that way. And hopefully we can get your question answered from there. But thank you so much for coming, if you're still there. And I will just look forward to reviewing applications from you later. So thanks so much.